you can be an elder at any age, and you can have
True.
experiences that help other people at any age. The greatest messages that I've received are from 65, 70-year-olds who are like, I listened to your podcast and I just found out that I was trans, and
Oh my
I
God,
like,
that's incredible. Content warnings for this episode include mental health, ableism, suicide, and dysphoria. Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests have lived and dwelt upon. Today, we honor the Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki.
And also the Anishinabe people on the Anishinabewaki, and the Dakota people on the Mni Sota Makoce.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Miati folks, welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender-diverse folks about their special interests.
The name of our show celebrates that gender expansiveness is wonderful.
Hi, I'm Gender Master, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Atlas of Phoenix, and my pronouns are also they, them. The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that this show is hosted by 2 folks who also identify as non-binary, transmasculine, neurodivergent, and disabled, with the passion for telling trans stories.
We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There are no social or medical prerequisites to be included in the community.
All right, so welcome to Genderful episode 96. Wow. Oh my God, 96 felt like we got episode number 100 coming up, which is going to be a special one. We also have episode 99 where we have a less special guest. That's going to be fun. It's me. I'm the guest.
Oh, okay.
A little bit of self-deprecating humor there. This week, our guest is Anna, fae+she pronouns, and is chatting with us about gender and disability. So along with her sis-dad, Anna co-hosts the Transgender Podcast, which has been running since December of 2021. So welcome to Genderful, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to have you here, and I'm hoping we have a pretty informative discussion because disability is something that I've recently become very acquainted with.
Yes,
because for those of you who don't know, I'm actually on disability leave from my job, so I've had to deal with the whole disability mega structure complex. So
yeah, it's a fairly new thing to me, kind of understanding it for myself, but I've also been doing work with it for a couple of years now. So I really wanted to kind of explore that within the space and kind of talk about my own experiences and share that.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think there's a lot of things about being disabled or having a disability that people who don't deal with those things on a regular basis may not be aware of. And I'm hoping that's something we can cover during the show because, oh boy, having to go through the system myself.
It's not fun.
Yeah, it's been an eye-opening experience. And it's, yeah, like you said, it hasn't been altogether enjoyable. So, so we have a couple of questions that we like to ask all of our guests. The first one being, what might be the things you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
So my dad really likes to bring up this one situation when I was like 3, where we were dressing up like at a children's museum or something, and he was like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a girl." So I think that there was a pretty good indication that I was probably going to be gender diverse when I grew up. But yeah, no, I really like to point to when I was about 12, I had unrestricted access to the internet, which for better or worse is a thing that a lot of people have access to. in my
Mm.
case, a lot better. And I was able to find out what being trans was, find the language, and be able to kind of put that language into practice, started finding my identity. At that point, I would have, started dressing more femininely, at least in private, and then kind of continued through my middle school years. I wore a skirt my entire 8th grade year. I said it was in protest because the school in their dress code had skirts are only for girls. And I was
Oh.
like, I'm going to protest this by wearing a skirt. It was just a reason to wear a skirt all year. Um, but yeah, no, then kind of when COVID hit, I socially transitioned at around 18. So going on about 3 years, 4 years strong in my transition here.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the internet has really been a very powerful tool for folks who are gender diverse because if you like, so I grew up before the internet. And oh boy, there was no information on this sort of thing when I was growing up. So just having access to that information, it's like, oh, you can assign labels to feelings that you have, and you realize that other people also feel this way, and that's a really powerful feeling. And I'm very glad that you had the opportunity to kind of explore that in safe environments.
Yeah.
Now, how would you say your relationship has to gender has evolved over time?
This is a harder question. Um, so I I always felt like something was wrong. I think that a lot of trans people can point to that.
Mm.
Um, but I started out by just believing that I was a woman, and that didn't feel right. So I was like, well, maybe I'm a demi girl, and that didn't feel right either. So it was kind of this like interesting kind of phase where I was trying to figure things out. I was already trying to explore my gender identity and kind of what my gender expression was. And then right around when I turned like a year or two after the pandemic, so like 2 or 3 years into my transition, when I turned about 20, 21, I found fae pronouns. And I was like, that's it right there. And so I kind of always knew that I was going to be non-binary. I just didn't have like the right label for that.
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of like my personal transition, and I'm still kind of figuring out what my gender expression is.
Right.
However, I'm also a co-host of the Raven Conspiracy, and it's been very fascinating to experience the whole system's gender diversity and transition. Because we've had gender affirming surgery, and so that was something that we, as a whole system, had to agree on. Um, but yeah, the whole system identifies as a non-binary. um it's a demi-fae is what we identify as, so sort of
Okay.
like non-binary, nothing kind of fae gender experience. And it's honestly just been really fascinating to understand how gender and being trans has influenced and has been influenced by DID.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, neopronouns is not something that I have a lot of personal experience with. So for those of us who are listening that may kind of not realize, like, what does like Faye, what does that pronoun mean to you?
Yeah, I had oh, I'm trying to remember the exact situation. I had somebody the other day. Oh, it was my advisor. So I'm going back to school
Mm.
this fall, and I was meeting with my advisor, and she was like, "I've never seen Fae Fair before, but when I think about it, it makes me think of like something glittery, like running through the woods." And I was like, "You're actually
Oh.
pretty close to it." For me, I am a witch, and I'm a kind of a spiritual person.
Mm.
And so for me, the the fae gender is kind of aligning with the fairies and and sort of their mischievous but also like ethereal and beautiful nature.
Mm.
I like to be out in the woods and be around in nature. I have elf ears in my purse that I've sometimes put on to help
Aw.
express my gender. And so, it's a very Mirami said so trickster gender in the chat, and I think that is
Yes.
probably pretty good. Yeah, so I try to embody the fairies in my gender, and I
Mm.
feel connected to my spirituality in that.
No, that's a really good explanation, and I really like that. And yeah, the whole trickster as a gender. I mean, I never thought of that. I mean, I definitely identify as a trickster, but not so much as my gender. I'm just a woman who likes to play pranks on people and generally be a chaos gremlin. So that's my vibe.
I love that. I taught myself when I was younger how to like pickpocket and lockpick, and I one of my favorite activities was pickpocketing someone's phone and reverse pickpocketing it onto them in a different pocket, so they would
Oh,
have no idea where their phone was.
oh my God.
One of my favorite things to do when I was like 14.
Oh my God. So that reminds me of a funny story once where like I pickpocketed my friend's phone to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But then like my neurospicy brain forgot that I had done that. So I just stole his phone and then we left wherever we were and I still had his phone. And then I got a call on his phone. He's like, "Why do you have my phone?" It's like, oh, whoops.
I love that so much. Yeah, the neurospicy hits me differently than a lot of things. When I went through psych testing, they were like, "We can't diagnose you with anything, but you definitely have the neurospicy going on something." Um, so I don't know. Yeah, I've not had so much of like the short term, like attention deficit. However, Lily, who is another co-host of the Raven Conspiracy, definitely has that like attention deficit and will forget what she is in the middle of doing.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and segue into our main topic for the discussion. So the first question we have is, what are your disabilities and gender, and how do they impact each other? We kind of touched upon the gender already, but I'm
Yeah.
more interested in how they intersect.
Yeah, so I have fibromyalgia, and I have a pretty bad case of it, just from having talked with a lot of other people who have fibro. I usually use a cane to walk around, and have had periods where it's been like I have been bedbound because of it. Um, I also have DID, which is I would consider another type of disability. I'm neurospicy, and so all of these kind of could be considered disabilities, and in a lot of ways, I find them debilitating. Um, we kind of touched on the gender, like you said. I I like to say that my disabilities inform my gender in the same way that my gender inform my disabilities and how we interact with them. So the fibro sometimes limits the way that I'm able to express my gender. Sometimes I want to wear heels, and that's just not something that I can really do all the time. But what I can do is decorate my cane. So my cane has a whole bunch of like queer stickers and trans
Aw.
stickers on it. Um, and sometimes when I am wanting to express myself, I try and build in some of that disability into it as well. So whether that be wearing a corset, like today I'm wearing a corset, for example, to kind of help straighten my back and give me sort of that hourglass look. But also sometimes you just want to accessorize in a fun and interesting way. So, get some fancy compression socks or something like that and really kind of jazz up some of your disability to make it not more palatable to other people, but more palatable to yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes to accept that you have a disability, and so you can make it easier on your own brain to accept and recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that like, if you're not born with a disability and you become disabled later in life, it is something that's like can be hard to accept depending on the nature of the disability and how much it affects your life. So,
Well,
um,
and fibro is something that looking back, I've recognized I've had probably since I was a child.
mhm.
But it's not something that I've really like found out about until later in life. And so, I think
Yeah,
that's important to remember too, is that disabilities can be a lifelong thing, and they can be something that you just didn't know about until you really started looking into it or talking about it and talking with people who have similar experiences.
And yeah, like, and fibro is a tough one. Like I've known a couple of people that have had that, and it's very much like quote unquote like invisible disability, and it's something that's very difficult to get, you know, a proper diagnosis for. So there's a lot of medical professionals that, like, I'm sure there's a lot of medical professionals that don't even think it's a real condition.
I went to a physical therapist who did not think it was a real thing and told me, basically told me to stop using a cane. Even though I'm like, this helps me to move. Like, what are you saying? So, you know, like it is something that unfortunately we're still having to fight the stigma of. Like trans broken arm syndrome, it's like fibro broken arm syndrome.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's something I have quite a lot of sympathy for, as you know, because I've had my own struggles with the medical system, and just getting people to listen to you is can be really, really difficult sometimes. So I mean, good for you that you have the supports that you need, and good for you that you're able to kind of express yourself in ways that kind of accommodate you know, the other things you have going on in your life. So you know, everyone's story is different, and we all like to express ourselves in different ways, and there's your way of expressing yourself isn't more or less valid than anyone else's. So that's it's good to see that. Now, how would you
Mirami asked a question that I want to kind of answer, which is, could you define trans broken arm syndrome for anyone who hasn't heard the term?
I haven't heard that term either, so
yeah,
I'm glad that Mirami asked.
So trans broken arm syndrome is a way to talk about discrimination towards trans people, using the example of, if a trans person goes to a like healthcare provider for a broken arm, and that healthcare provider is like, oh, well, your arm is broken because you are trans, you know, and kind of attributing your ailment to you being trans, or in the reverse of that, erasing your trans identity from, you know, whatever ailment you have. So, you know, you have a broken arm. Well, I'm just not even going to accept you as a, you know, patient because you're trans, or I'm not going to recognize that you have these intersecting identities. That's kind of the briefest overview that I can give of it. But if you're at all interested, I really highly recommend that you take a look at it and kind of exactly what Juice text said, which is being like it's broken because of those hormones or such. Exactly.
No, that's something. I mean, I haven't heard it I haven't heard it referred to as trans broken arm syndrome, but that concept is something I'm very familiar with, and is not something that's limited to just trans people, because it's basically like whenever someone has a lifestyle change that someone doesn't agree with, and then something bad happens to them, there is this tendency to attribute that bad thing to the lifestyle change that they don't agree with. So yeah. So I experienced that a lot so I used to do the keto diet, and literally anything bad that ever happened to me, it's like, oh, well, it's because you're doing that fad diet. I'm like, no, it's unrelated.
Yeah. No, the attribute, like, just the erasure of medical problems because of an identity that someone has, or something that they're doing, or you know, I used to work on the ambulance as an EMT, and the amount of discrimination that I saw from providers towards patients, you know, yes, we would help them and we would try to do everything for them, but the amount of like afterward of like, oh, well, that patient, you know, this is like their third call in 2 months because they keep doing drugs or whatever, and it's like, hey, chill out a little bit. You know, like, let's maybe not be so like discriminatory towards people who are fighting addiction and are fighting, you know, oppression.
Exactly. I mean, like spoiler alert, people don't do drugs because their life is going well and they're happy. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they're just because they have an addiction, that doesn't mean they're any less deserving of help. And Juice brought up a good point that I was actually thinking about when I was relating my story, is like fat people get this a lot. So if you're overweight and you go to see the doctor for anything, it's whatever you got going on, it's because you're overweight. It's like, well, you need to lose weight. Well, you know, maybe this other thing has nothing to do with my weight.
So I don't really like I'm technically overweight or like in the obese category from the like medical side, but I don't consider myself to be like overweight very much at all.
Mhm.
And I almost was denied being able to get surgery and was told by my surgeon that
Oh yeah.
like directly you will die if you have the surgery, basically,
Yeah.
because of the like stupid BMI system. Thank you,
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, so I mean, like, that's something that I'm kind of like pursuing for some point in the future. And I know because I live in Canada, and we have one clinic in the entire country that does MTF bottom surgery, and yeah, you do have to be below a certain BMI before they'll take you on as a client.
It's
So
so stupid.
yeah, and
So
like that was part of
stupid.
the motivation to start losing weight. I mean, I was already planning on doing that, but it's like, hey, this is a bonus.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a medical reason for it. I don't know if I super believe it, but
I can't say as a medical professional if there is or isn't, but as a
yes.
personal, there really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a doctor. Disclaimer, I am not a doctor. Please don't take medical advice from me. Go listen to your medical practitioner. So these are just my unqualified opinions.
Exactly, exactly.
So
You're not my patient. Don't take anything I'm
yes.
saying as medical advice.
All right. So again, the whole neurospice, I get so easily distracted, which is not a good trait to have in a podcast host, but good thing I have a list of questions in front of me to help me. So how would progressing through your gender transition, I'm sorry, let's try that one again. How has progressing through your gender transition helped you with understanding your disabilities?
I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think kind of getting into more of the specifics of that, the um the way that people expect you to be as a woman or as a man, or as a non-binary person is very much a you have to fit these societal norms, these societal expectations. Um, so how I see myself as a woman and how other people see me as a woman or as a non-binary individual, um, you know, having a disability or having, I guess, a few disabilities means that I really have to overcompensate. So I can't wear heels. And so how do I then compensate it for myself with that? And how do
Mhm.
I compensate for other people with that? Unfortunately, we still live in a society where the expectation is that people fit into these boxes. And so how can I, as a woman, fit into the box of woman if I'm using a cane or if I am walking slowly or, needing to take my time, getting easily distracted, any of these things that could be attributed to a disability. Um, so I think understanding my own gender transition has opened up my ability to understand my disabilities and has opened up my ability to um, look inward and look at how I'm
Mhm.
really being affected by the things in my life, such as fibro, such as uh, neurospicy,
Yeah.
DID. Uh, yeah, so I that was kind of a long roundabout way to
Oh
answer the
no.
question, but yeah, no, I think that the short answer of that is gender identity has given me the tools. Understanding my gender identity has given me the tools to understand intersectionality and how intersectionality um, influences my life and influences power dynamics and influences gender. Um, it really has allowed us to, I don't know, to just be ourselves a little bit more and to recognize that. Um, I will also say, just because I accidentally slipped into it, I use single singular pronouns and plural pronouns for myself and the system interchangeably sometimes. So if you see me saying like us or we or something, it's because I'm kind of trying to include the rest of the system as well.
Right, right. No, that's that's absolutely valid. I mean, there's different ways that our society kind of perceives gender, and yeah, if you're also perceived as being disabled, I mean, in an ideal society, that shouldn't really affect how people view you, but we don't live in an ideal society, unfortunately. So
Exactly.
now we've kind of already touched upon this a little. Now, how would you say your identities have been medicalized and treated?
So I went through psych testing earlier this year, and they couldn't identify the neurospicy that I had. I went through ADHD testing. They were like, you definitely don't have ADHD, even though you have all of the signs of ADHD. They had me, everything pointed to it except for like the test where they like, you have to click on the thing when it shows up. I don't know. They were like, everything except for that showed that you had ADHD. Then I went through autism testing, and they were like, well, you're showing a lot of signs of autism, but you have a lot of emotional intelligence. And so it's like, are you masking your autism? We don't know. And I come from a lot of a traumatic background. And so I think that what we have kind of decided on is that the trauma is my my neurospicy, and not necessarily like autism or ADHD or something. And I just have a lot of autistic and ADHD like traits. Fibro is a little bit different. As you said, it's an invisible disability. And I have had oh gosh, I am totally blanking now. I've had physical therapy, which did not go well. I go to interventional pain management where they like inject my shoulders with like lidocaine or something to break up some of that muscle tissue. And it's, I'd really rather just, I'd rather not be going there, but it helps me to like live my life.
Mm,
And then DID is, I think, really where this comes into play. I have had so much of my identity erased medically because DID is still a condition that people don't believe is real.
mm,
I've had people look at me and tell me directly to my face, "Oh, you're making it up," or "This isn't a real thing," or "Are you sure that you have DID?" Are you sure? I know that you've been diagnosed with it, but
yeah.
are you certain that you have it?
Have you tried not being DID?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very much the same energy.
Yeah.
So I have really tried to implement ways to incorporate other people from the system. And part of it is
Mhm.
that we got our DID diagnosis about a year ago. And it's been a long year of trying to figure out and how to do that. How to do that. Sorry, brain is neurospicy's
Yeah.
kicking in. How to work with the plurality. Um, but it's been really cool to see so many individuals in our system starting to come out
Mhm.
and show their faces and show, their identities. My public presence is as Anna and as, this fun trans woman host. But that doesn't necessarily speak for the whole experience of the Raven
Yeah.
conspiracy. Um, and so I'm glad that I can like kind of share that and talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that really needs to be talked about more. I mean, I learned about like plurality fairly recently because we have actually a lot of folks in our community that are plural. We have a whole section in our Discord for exploring plurality, and I mean, coming from the generation that I come from, that was kind of seen as a quote unquote a mental disorder.
Mhm.
But it just had never really occurred to me that that's just a different way to exist. And I think that's wonderful and fascinating that that you can live as a collection of different identities. And it just kind of shows how diverse the human experience can be, and uh, uh, how just wonderful and how different everyone can be. So I think it's great. So, and the more I learn about it, the more it's like, oh yeah, I mean, and I kind of wish that like more people kind of like had that attitude, because I think there's like kind of this knee-jerk reaction of most folks that kind of anything that's kind of different from their own experience is to kind of try to take it down, or mock it, or try to ostracize these people. But if you just kind of accept it as just a different way to experience life, that's it's beautiful. I love it.
Miranda brought up a really good point too, which I was going to touch on, which is and the human adjacent experience as well. We have some non-human alters in the Raven Conspiracy, and so yes, we live in a human body, but that doesn't necessarily explain all of the experience. So thank you, Miranda, for bringing that up as well.
Yes. So I just I like to learn about it, because it's so completely different from my own personal experience. And I want to know more about it. So it's and I feel like people don't talk about it enough.
They really don't.
Yeah.
They really don't, especially plurality, but
Uh-huh.
disabilities in general is not discussed enough and is so often erased.
Yeah, 100%. So where would you say is the space for disability activism in trans spaces, and vice versa?
This is the question that I think I'm most excited about, and I don't know why. But this has been something that I've been learning and teaching myself about as well, a lot of in the past year or two, which is the trans and disabled intersection is so much bigger than people realize. And I think part of that is that when you have the tools to understand intersectionality and understand where your identities are, you are able to then learn more about the identities that you maybe have missed in your life, such as your disability identities. So where is the space? It is at Pride. It is at events. It is in spaces like this. It is wherever there is queer activism and space and experiences happening, there also should be disability, accessibility, all of those spaces also need to have a place there. Sorry, my brain is like all over the place today.
No, it's all good. You're doing great.
Normally I'm much more fluent than this, but I'm not masking as hard today, so I think that's part of it. No, but wherever you have a queer space, there should be accessibility, and there should be a disabled representation there as well. I think about interpretation. I've planned a lot of queer events in my community, and one of the biggest things that we dedicate a large portion of our budget to is oh my god, I just said the word, now I can't think of it. ASL interpreters. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Because they make events so much more accessible to our deaf folks and to the people who aren't able to experience all of the event otherwise. And especially when we have music going on, or speakers, or things that we want to have shared with the community, we can't ignore our deaf and disabled communities in that either. That was a really long, again, roundabout.
No, you're fine. You're doing great.
This is a topic that, like I said, I'm still very much getting used to and getting getting into. And so if it sounds like I am thinking on the spot and thinking as I'm like talking, that's why, because I'm still drawing on information that is still fresh and new and hasn't really been developed as thoroughly as some of the other like gender talking points.
No, and that's perfectly fair. I mean, it's when you bring up like pride. So I mean, personally, I attended my first Pride event since coming out about a month ago, and I saw plenty of disabled folks there. And my co-host Gender Meowster is also disabled, and they were very happy to take their wheelchair out for their first spin for the first time. So that we crowdfunded here on this channel actually. But yeah, just seeing, it's like you said, the intersection between disability and gender diversity is a fairly large one, and we can't just leave these folks behind. Like
No.
we have to make room for everyone. So regardless of your abilities, like everyone has to be welcome, and there has to be like room for everyone to be there.
As much as I have some gripes with the biggest pride in Minnesota, the Twin Cities Pride, I have to say that they did an amazing job of having an accessible map and having having places where there were quiet zones and there were routes planned out for people who need some of that more sensory deprivation, I guess is the best word for it. The one thing that I will say was a struggle, especially as someone who is using a cane, was there is a lot of walking that was involved and not a lot of space to move around. It was very crowded. And so, we had to go with the flow. We couldn't take our time as much as we needed to. We couldn't, use the tools and aids that we have developed and need to be able to move effectively. So it's important to also recognize that while some things can be good, like an accessible map, other things still need work. There's space for both of them.
Yeah, and we can't really fall into that trap of complacency. It's like, oh, well, we did the one thing and we're done. It's like, no, it's you got to keep working on it. It's a process that never ends. So yeah, we definitely have to. There's still, like, we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Well, and this doesn't even include, this is all like physical and sensory disabilities. It doesn't even include the DID aspect of it. Where is plurality at Pride? Where is where are these plural artists and creators and experiences in these prides? All of the pluralities that I know have queer and trans identities. So why aren't we talking more about that?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, like we were saying before, that it's not talked about it. Like personally, I first heard about this like a year ago. So
exactly.
So
the only reason I got my diagnosis was because I had a friend who was diagnosed, and they were sharing their experiences, and I was like, oh, I have those experiences. Maybe I should get, maybe I should consider learning more about this. And so that was a year ago. And I think that we are getting better at understanding these identities, but it's still a ongoing process and something that is another accessibility thing that we should be talking about. I am a huge advocate for anytime you meet someone, asking, what's your name, what's your pronouns? And this isn't just like a plurality thing. This is also like a gender fluid thing or a different experience, any part of the dissociative experience. Because, people, especially trans people, know the experience of changing their names, having different pronouns. And so if we always are asking, then we take the stigma off of pluralities and also off of trans people. What's your name? What's your pronouns? What do I refer to you as? What do you want to be, how can I refer to you? All those are amazing things that I recommend we do anytime we meet someone. I mean, heck, in our green room, I asked Miranda
Yes.
what your pronouns were. So,
Yes.
it's important that
I was
we
just going to mention that. So yeah, that's something that like I 100% agree with. That's something should be normalized quite a bit more than it already has been. And I mean, I need to recognize that I need to do better with that because I don't always ask pronouns and it's still because like I mean, I identify as as a binary woman. So the non-binary experience, while I have many friends who are non-binary, that's not my lived experience. So I sometimes forget that's like, oh, right. There are other genders besides like men and women. So,
yeah.
so like sometimes like my brain just assigns pronouns to people. It's like, no, I shouldn't go with that like first knee jerk assumption. I should always ask.
Well, and
Uh,
the presentation too is a big part,
mhm.
being a non-binary, a demi-fae woman, and a demi-fae system, we oftentimes get coded as women. And it's like, sure, that's a part of our
Mhm.
identity, and you can use she, her for us, and that's completely acceptable. But something that's always missed, and the reason why I put fae fair first is because uh, it's so often missed from our identity, and it's so important that
Mhm.
we recognize that as well. Um,
Yeah.
those intersectional and neo-pronoun identities.
Yeah. And I feel like there needs to be kind of like better education for folks who uh for the folks that use more than one set of pronouns. Because when I first started joining queer spaces, I would see people that use more than one set of pronouns, like the she, theys, he, theys, they, fairs, and she, hers, and that sort of thing. It's like, well, which one do I use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I've since learned that like there's kind of a there's kind of uh a way of like denoting like which ones are preferred.
mhm.
But like for the normies out there that don't necessarily interact in queer spaces, that can be very overwhelming. So yeah, I feel like we should kind of be out there educating more a little bit. It's like, hey, like there are people who use different pronouns, and this is kind of like the recommended usage of when you should be using them.
I just want to shout this out. Juliet Maddie says, when asked by cis people, I love telling people to use the pronouns that makes them the least comfortable. I love that so much. I'm going to start adopting that. Use the
Oh
pronouns that make
yes.
you the least comfortable
I
because
I
it will
love
make
that.
me so
I
happy.
honestly I love making people uncomfortable. So like
Exactly.
so like I have my dead name is ethnic, and it can be pronounced more than one way. And sometimes people would ask me, so like, do you pronounce it this way or this way? And it's like people always ask me that, and I always say the same thing. How dare you speak to me?
Do not perceive me. Um, yeah, so my full name is Aliana. And people misspell it, mispronounce it all the time. It's Alina, it's I mean, I've never gotten Aliana. Maybe once, maybe one time since I changed my name have I gotten Aliana. And so that's why I go by Anna, is because it's just easier for me to be
Mhm.
like, I don't want to hear Alina all the time. Um, but yeah, no, I have a very similar experience of like,
Yeah.
how dare you? How
Yeah,
dare
and
you
it's
perceive
also
me?
like since changing my name to Miranda, like it's been a very strange experience of like people not struggling to say my name anymore.
Mhm.
And now I just like I hear my name in like other contexts where it's like this happened to me recently when I was playing the game Mass Effect, and there's a character in that game called Miranda. And every time they would say Miranda, I was like, oh, how do they know my name? It's like, oh wait, that's right. There's another, because like usually when I hear my name, it's like it's a very uncommon name. So I don't hear it in other contexts. So
Yeah.
it's very, yeah, it was a transition, no pun intended.
It's funny because Anna is also one that I get a lot. And Anna is fine. I'm fine
Mhm.
with Anna. I have a German background, so Anna is like close enough, but Anna is
Mhm.
like how you pronounce it. And
Yeah.
so I find it so funny that, not only do we assume people's identities, we also assume their names. I mean, heck, I've been doing it with Twitch chat. Like I don't know how to pronounce half these these usernames. And so I feel like another thing that we can do when we ask people, what's your name, what's your pronouns, we get to hear how they pronounce it, how
Yes.
they use it, and are able to then respond to that accordingly. You know, if I were like, oh, it's Anna, and then if someone were to look at me and be like, Anna, I'd be like, okay, that feels intentional at this point.
Yes. Yes. Yay. So these next couple questions we've kind of already talked about a fair amount, but I mean, I want to talk about it more because, as I've said a couple of times during this pod, this isn't talked about enough. So what can you tell us about your experience with plurality?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with DID about a year ago. And since then, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but I think we have about 27 alters and growing, which isn't that few, but is also not like that many. All things considering, there really isn't a like average number of alters
Oh.
for people, at least that I know of. I think one of my friends who is a system, they have about like 50 alters, I think. And in my experience, those alters can kind of be you know, their own. They come out infrequently to frequently to all the time. You know, I'd say I'm one of the most frequent frienters as Anna, fae+she. But we also have Lily, who is cisgender, and a demon, who's a co-host. She comes out fairly frequently, usually when I'm at home and not really like out in public. She doesn't really like to like show her face then because she has to mask a lot because people don't understand DID, unfortunately. But we have like Max, who is they them non-binary, and they are a combination of myself, Lily, and then Eva, which if you've seen Wally, um, Eva, or Eve, I guess, I don't remember her exact name, is the like little robot that Wally falls in love with.
Yes.
And so that's an intersection, or interject from that. So yeah, we have a couple of cool alters in us. If any of you have seen Owl House, Rain Whispers is one of our alters. So yeah, there's a couple of different cool people in there. But yeah, the most interesting thing that I have experienced personally is having an understanding and reasons as to why things happen now. You know, why I wake up sometimes while I'm doing something, or while I like wake up and realize that I'm wearing something that I didn't remember putting on, or you know, something like that. And we have a semi-severe case of catatonia. So when we go dissociative, like our whole body just collapses. And that's led to a couple of falls. Thankfully, we have like training on how to fall properly. But you know, so that's also led to some situations of like, we don't want to hit our head. We don't want to, you know, to put ourselves in any danger. And so it's just been nice to have some of those answers to why those things are happening. Yeah, I think that kind of about answers the experience question.
Yeah. So for those listening that who are kind of like not familiar with the concept of plurality or DID, can we maybe kind of define what that is?
Yeah, so DID, or dissociative identity disorder, is one of the extreme ends of the dissociative scale. Usually happens to individuals who have experienced childhood trauma, and it is a coping mechanism where individuals who didn't have support, or you know, were developing in a unforgiving, I think is, I'm okay to say, that environment, are develop people to help support them. So and that is sort of internally the experience. So for me, I am one of the people who is classified as the apparent normal parts, or there are a couple different names, and so I'm likely the person who was the person who developed DID, if that makes sense. But then like Lily is a pleasure-seeking alter, so her job is to find ways to comfort the system, to get needs met, those comfort needs met. Eva is a gatekeeping alter, so she kind of determines who's coming in and out of the system, like fronting, which is kind of who is present at any given time. Yeah, I am trying to think of what else. To those who have plurality, I am sorry for saying this, but it used to be known as multiple personality disorder. That is no longer a used or acceptable term usually, so we try and stick to DID or plurality because they aren't necessarily just personalities. They are like fully realized actual people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that I mean, most folks listening would have some sort of idea what it is. It's something that, like, for better or worse, gets presented in a lot of media and popular culture. Sometimes in ways that are realistic, sometimes in ways that are not so realistic. So, I mean, if you could say to people who their only experience with DID is what they see in film, how is the reality different from that?
A lot of ways. I think the biggest thing, and this isn't just towards DID, but I have been called violent by people who don't super understand mental health or DID. I am not a violent person. I really hope that that's known. But something that is portrayed often is that people who have mental health issues, I guess is the best word that I can think of for that, disorders, whatever kind of terminology you want to use, are violent or are seen as, other. And that isn't necessarily the experience that a lot of us have. Sybil is kind of the best thing that people know about DID, and it is the worst. It's just the worst experience and movie and everything about DID ever. I do not recommend people watch Sybil, especially if you are a plurality, because it is really triggering, to be honest. Juice brings up the whole Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde trope as well, which is a very common thing. You have an alter who's like ultra violent, or you have this like secret past or something, and that's just not really how it is. A lot of us just try and work and keep the system safe is the main thing. So another thing is we use the term alters. Some people use different terms. When we're referring to the physical body, we call that the body as well, or the system. So there are a couple different terms there as well. But yeah, I think that I hit the question there.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's just something that like I really feel like more people should know about, and unfortunately, most people's only exposure to this sort of thing is what they see in, like, Hollywood and stuff like that. So I mean, there are some more positive portrayals. I think one of my favorite portrayals is in a little show called Doom Patrol, where one of the characters is plural, and it is very deeply explored within that show. And that's I absolutely adore that show. I think everyone should go watch it, but I don't know if you're familiar with it, so I really okay. So it's like a superhero show, but not a superhero show. It's about a group of misfits who get together, and they all have problems, and they're all working through their problems.
That sounds awesome.
Yes, it is. It's very weird. It's unapologetically queer.
We love that.
Yes, it is. It's such a fantastic show. I love it to death. But one of the characters is plural, and she describes her different personalities as like being part of like an underground. So we can see her like in her mind's eye. It's like, because it's a, it's a science fiction superhero show where they actually get to travel into the underground and meet all the different characters that form part of her system. So yeah, that's something that like I'd be really curious to hear thoughts of people who actually have this as a lived experience as to how good of a representation that is.
Juice
But I'm
also,
gonna
oh, sorry. Juice also
sorry.
brings up a good one, which
Yes.
is Moon Knight, which is what I was going to bring up. Moon Knight,
Mm,
which is a Marvel TV show, canonically has DID. And I can't speak for everyone who has plurality because I am one person. One
yes.
person who is a plurality, I guess.
Yes.
But Moon Knight was pretty positive to me, and it showed the catatonia and the
Yeah.
the experiences of like hearing people talk to you who aren't necessarily talking to you.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's something that's like I would assume is very difficult to explain to someone who doesn't have that experience.
Very
Uh,
hard.
yes. And I just like honestly, I can't imagine the experience of just like, just waking up and you're like you don't remember how you got there. You don't remember how you got into those clothes or that to me that sounds absolutely terrifying.
It is the first couple times.
Yeah.
After, like, once you kind of, I think that humans are pretty good at adapting to situations. And once it kind of happens a couple of times, you just accept it as part of your reality. What I will say is having a diagnosis of DID has allowed me to understand those better and to adapt to them better. Develop tools that
Hmm.
that are able to help me understand that kind of stuff. Waking up
Hmm.
in a body, or waking up in clothes that I don't remember putting on, or waking up somewhere that I'm like, I don't remember how I got here. I don't know what's going on. And thankfully I've got a really supportive partner who has helped me to kind of reorient some of that thinking.
No, that's really awesome. Um, I had a thought there and then I lost it.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That feeling is so frustrating.
Oh my God, yes, it happens all the time. It's like, I might find it later. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll just move on. So how would you say your plurality has affected your experience of gender and disability?
Yeah. I'm probably one of a non I don't know. I'm not gonna recount that statement that I was thinking of in my own brain. I think that I am a person who classifies DID as a disability. I'm not necessarily sure on what other systems think about that, what other health professionals think about that, but to me, it seems like a very debilitating thing, especially with the catatonia. Like that
Mm,
has led to quite a lot of difficulty for me. Um, what I will say about my gender is that it has allowed me the experience to live in different gender identities for the people who are in my system. I'm
mm,
gonna kind of explain that a little bit better because I was thinking about that as I was saying it. But eh, part of my identity is woman. And we have a lot of non-binary individuals in our system. And so they don't have woman as their identity, or they might be transmasc or, not experience the same sort of like feminine experience that I do. And so what understanding DID has allowed me to do is help those alters um, find their own genders and start to express them and experience them.
mm.
Um, Unfortunately, my closet is very feminine still, but we have like a button up and a blazer and some of that other stuff that really helps some of those non-binary alters to feel more in line with their own gender and gender expression. Um, and like it was a thing that we all had to agree to when I was going through surgery. was how are we going to are we going to agree on this? Are we going to be able to share this experience in a really helpful manner?
No, that sounds very difficult because, I mean, speaking from personal experience, like questioning your gender and going through a transition is hard enough when you have to do it once. When you have to do it for every single one of your alters, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, and thankfully we're at a point where a lot of them have the tools that I have, because there is some
Hmm.
like cross connections and memories. But there definitely still is sometimes where some alters are going through their own kind of gender experiences and gender identity crises.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so yeah, I think that gender identity has really helped, or DID has really helped us to experience all of the spectrum of gender in our
Mhm.
system, and not just focus in on the feminine or the fae gender. We do identify as a demi-fae system, so we still use fae fair even if it's raven, the system. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is a fae fair identifying person, or everyone is
Right.
a they them identifying person. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like each alter can have their own thing going on. So I know there is in our community there is we have someone who is plural who their various alters all pretty much all have different pronouns. So and it's just it's so fascinating to me that you can have, in one body you can have so many different expressions
You can have
of
so much gender in this one
yes,
container.
yes. It's like we took all the gender energy and we just compressed it into like a single vessel.
One system, all the gender.
Yes. It's like a neutron star. There's just like
Yeah.
there's like all this pressure and it's all confined into this like tiny space.
This is I not being a gender fluid person, I understand where some of this gender fluidity comes from, because I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
no, sometimes, I remember waking up and being a non-binary person, or like waking up and being a masculine person. And it's not
Mhm.
that like I personally am that, but I might have someone who's co-fronting with me who does feel that way, or does feel a lot stronger towards that non-binary um non-binary experience. Sorry, I was laughing. Near me just put
Yes.
slaps roof of car. This
This
baby
baby
can
can
fit
pitch so much
so much gender.
I love that.
Uh, yeah, this baby can fit so much gender in her.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, gender is so critical to DID, just like DID is so critical to our own gender experience.
Hmm. No, then and that makes a lot of sense. Um, Now, what can folks working in trans activism and disability activism do to be more welcoming and affirming to plural systems?
The biggest thing is ask, who's fronting today? Great question. Something that my therapist and I developed together is every time that I walk into her office, she asks, who do I have today? And that works for us. And it might not work for everyone else who has a system, but it, just like we are such advocates of asking for pronouns and asking for names and everything, that should be the standard for everything, but especially for folks with DID and who are a
Mhm.
plurality. Because when you are able to ask who's fronting, you open up the door for those alters who might have social anxiety, who might be
Mhm.
um, scared of what might happen if they show themselves, that
Mhm.
you are showing them that you are a welcoming and open space, to allow them a chance to be recognized. Juliet Maddie says, being asked who's fronting is so nice, a chance to be recognized. Exactly. It is the recognition that's important. Um, it also opens the door for conversations. If you meet someone and you ask them what their name and pronouns are, and then you get to talking, and maybe you meet up again a couple of days later and they use a different name or pronoun, that is a way to open a conversation and to start that dialogue. And it allows for pluralities especially, but even gender diverse folks to share their identities and to be more open and to be more visible about that. Other ways that trans and disability advocates can be more open to plural spaces is having places that people who experience catatonia, like dissociative catatonia like myself, are able to sit down or lay down or be physically safe. There are often times where we need to dissociate for one reason or another, and there isn't anything around, and so the only option is to fall or lay on the ground, and that isn't always the safest
No, of
place
course
or
not.
thing for us. So being aware of seating, which goes back to our disability conversation of let's make sure that there is accessible seating and accessible areas for people with all disabilities. It's also important to recognize that individuals who are pluralities or who have DID may not want to talk about it and may just want to have their own experience and be recognized for that. Just as though it's never a trans person's job to educate, it's never a system's job to educate, and so if it is something that you have people in your life who do have DID, who you want to learn more about DID, whatever the situation may be, it's your job to educate yourself and to learn, and it's not the system's job who you're talking to. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of in activism. I guess just in daily life, something to keep in mind too is to not make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how often when I talk about DID, the conversation is then all about DID.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just want to have coffee and talk about the new, movie that came out or whatever, or how
Yeah.
Gwen Stacy in the Spider-Verse movie is trans, like that.
Yes.
So, it's important to also recognize that there is some, that there is a space for it, but it's also not a thing that we necessarily want to have a big deal of.
Yeah. And I think that's something that like every trans person can relate to, or really anyone that's part of a marginalized group. It's whatever it is that makes you different is the thing that everyone always wants to talk about. And it's like, sometimes you're just like, man, I just want to get my carton of milk. That's
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, I think you bring up a good point that it's, you need to create that environment to make that person comfortable to talk about that if they want to, right? So when you're asking the questions like, who's fronting today? That kind of gives the opportunity to, because like you said, like someone might have social anxiety, and some people just need to be invited to do things, and they won't do things on their own initiative. And that's something that is, I very much relate to, as someone that I'm basically a vampire. You have to invite me into your house, I won't go in. So
yes. Oh, I understand that energy big time.
Yes. So, and yeah, just kind of, it's like, would you like to do this? And some people need that. And even if that person doesn't want to at that time, at least they know that they are safe to do so at that time. So,
I think it's also important to recognize that the point, I guess, is the word I'm going with. I don't really like that, but it's kind of the reason for DID existing is as a protection, and as a as a coping mechanism. And so when you open the door for an alter to say, oh, it's actually not this person who, you know, it's not on today, or it's not, you know, whoever. You are creating a space that then feels safer and allows the
Mhm.
alters to not feel on edge as much. You know, it's really challenging for child alters, for example. I have got a couple of child alters to feel
Mhm.
safe out in the world because they are in this adult body and perceived as an adult, but they are like developmentally like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And so it's when you are opening that door, you're allowing the alters that might be hidden and the alters that might not necessarily feel safe otherwise to show themselves and not need to mask and not dedicate that energy to that experience. I mean, as trans people, I think that's something that we can really vibe with. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've had to mask as a masculine person just to feel safe. Um,
Mhm.
so it's a way to allow alters to feel safer and to show their experiences.
Mhm. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, very illuminating. This is, I mean, I know I learned a lot about plurality today,
I'm very
and
glad.
definitely learned a lot about disability. I hope for those of you listening also learned a lot. We do have some concluding questions that we like to ask our guests. First
Fantastic.
of all, is there anything that we missed about the intersection of gender and disability that you'd like to make sure you say?
I just want to reiterate the fact that if you are a disabled person, if you have a disability, um, if you have experiences that do not align with the ableist culture that we have, you are valid and you are accepted and you are welcome at my pride. You're welcome at,
Yes.
you know, at my events, and um, that we should be raising those voices just as much as we should be raising BIPOC voices and you know, other social, I don't like the term social minorities, but that's kind of what I'm going to be going with here, which is, you know, we should be
Marginalized
raising
groups.
marginalized groups. Thank you. That was the word I was looking
Yes.
for.
Yes.
We should be raising the voices of marginalized groups in the queer community and in
Mhm.
these communities that are already marginalized. Um,
Mhm.
so I'd say keep thinking about that and don't be afraid to raise your voice just because you aren't necessarily a, you know, a able-bodied, you know, able-minded person. Your voice matters, your experience matters, and it's important that we share all of that.
Yeah. That's a wonderful message and something I wholeheartedly agree with.
Um, yeah, sorry. I also just wanted to say DID should be talked about more as well.
Mhm.
And it's important that we recognize that gender and disability and DID are all under the same umbrella of activism for me in my
Mhm.
life, and they can be for you as well. I'm trying to add other, um, you know, activist identities to that, but I speak from my own lived experience, and so
Sure.
you know, I want everyone to be able to speak from their own lived experiences and to feel like they can, especially in these trans and queer spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of been the recurring theme of our whole talk today is we need to talk about this more.
Mhm.
So, so there is a question that way I always love to ask, because unfortunately the framing of you know, discussion of transness these days is often focused around you know, trauma or you know, being hurt or whatnot. But I think it's far more important to talk about trans joy. So can you share experience with us with gender euphoria?
I'm so glad you're asking me this question because this is
Yes.
how I end my show every single time
Awesome. I
with
love
the
it.
gender euphoria. Um, I think today's gender euphoria for me is I got a new black lipstick, and I wore it
Oh,
out the other day, and I felt like such a good, like, bad queen, you know?
Mm,
And it was like so validating and euphoric for like my goth aesthetic and feeling,
awesome.
that it was a good time.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that trans masks in the audience may not fully get, but oh boy, his makeup, oh my god, makeup is just incredible.
Think
I love it.
about like
Yes,
getting that new shirt or binder or something. Like that is
yes.
the experience for trans femmes with it. Pardon
Yeah,
me. It's like,
because I mean, it's not as if trans masked folks have no experience with makeup.
yeah.
Assigned female at birth, I'm sure you learned makeup at some point in your life, but it doesn't have that same kind of euphoria that it brings for us who are for us who are trans femmes. So
It
uh
also has that like tinge of like forbiddenness, like that little bit of
mm,
like, this is a forbidden thing that I'm doing, and that makes me feel like rebellious, like I'm a little bit like of a rebel spirit. Like I had swatches from all the different lipsticks on my wrist, and I was like, I feel like I did something that I wasn't supposed to, even though I know it's totally socially acceptable for me to
oh
do this.
yeah.
Like it felt like validating and such a good experience.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting because that's a very when you say it's like the forbidden or whatever. So like my reaction to that is so different because I mean,
really.
yeah, because I mean I had so much anxiety with it.
Mm,
So like I remember like as a kid, like I would try to, sneak on some makeup sometimes when no one was
mhm.
looking. And even when I started transitioning, I mean, like I had to have a friend take me to Sephora because I couldn't go by myself. I was too scared.
I
And so
I think
it's
some of that comes with accepting and understanding your own identity, though.
mhm,
Like, I
mhm.
don't think that, because I fully understand. I had the same experience. The first time I
Yeah.
like went full makeup shopping, I had to have like three people with me just so I
Mhm.
would like, one, have the accountability and actually get something that I wanted, and
Yeah.
two, to have the like support and friendship. But yeah, no, now that I'm like a couple of years, more than a couple of years into my transition,
Mhm.
um, it still has that tinge of like anxiety, but with this like, oh, I'm like tearing down the system. I'm doing something
Oh.
that like the society doesn't want me to do. And so it kind of has that feeling to me too. But I fully understand where you're coming from with
Yeah, no,
that,
I
like,
kind of like got over that, like, oh, I'm being a rebel. I mean, to
yeah.
me, it's like, I mean, society perceives me as a woman now. So it just like, this is part of the expectation that I wear makeup these days.
Mhm.
So I normally do my makeup for the show. I just kind of was busy right before, so I didn't have time. But like, I mean, if I'm going out, I'm doing my makeup and I don't feel bad about it. I really don't feel anything about it. This is just something that like I do that I think makes me look pretty and
Mhm.
like is validating to me. And I do it for my own reasons. But like, I that whole sense of going against society's rules, I don't get that. It's to me, it's like, if anything, I'm following society's rules by putting on makeup.
I think that's non-binary in me. Is like the
Yeah.
like breaking up the like stereotypes, and also like
Hmm.
the swatches, that to
Hmm.
me, like I've never swatched before, and so it was like, oh, this feels like different and new. And I
Hmm.
think also some of that like goth kind of rebellious nature is already in
Yes.
there, and so it was kind of like a euphoric experience all the way around.
Yes. No, and I love that for you. And uh I had a thought there and I lost it. But yeah, no, I think you need I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that's kind of like the difference between like the non-binary experience and the binary experience is like I try to fulfill societal expectations of what's expected out of women, whereas like people who are non-binary are kind of doing their own thing because there aren't any societal expectations of what a non-binary person should be. So you're really just kind of making up your own rules.
Hmm. I'll tell you what, I also put this slit in my eyebrow the other day, and that was like
Oh,
such a euphoric experience as well. Because
really?
I was like, oh, it's like changing my look so drastically. And I realized that it's not, but it is.
I mean,
So
honestly, I thought that was like a scar. I thought you like got into a fight with someone and be like, oh, you should see the other guy.
You should see the other gal. No, it's intentional. I just wanted to, draw back to that queer experience. I mean, that's really it. It's like it's always just making up your own rules and drawing back to that queer experience.
Yeah. And it's just kind of like sometimes I feel like when I go out and I don't put on makeup, that's when I feel like I'm being a rebel. Because like, nah, I'm not even gonna try to like pass. I'm just gonna do my own thing.
I love it. Hey, you pass excellently without makeup. So, I think that you're beautiful and amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I actually like this is supposed to be a show about you, but I mean, if I can share a story about passing.
Please do, yeah.
So I am a bit of a gym rat. So I go to the gym, 4 times a week. And I have a friend that, we talk sometimes. And I put zero effort into passing at the gym. Like I'm literally, I tie my hair up in a hair tie. I'm wearing like a tank top and my workout clothes. I'm disheveled. Sometimes I have like visible facial hair, and I'm just like zero effort. And I start talking to my friend, and she's like, it's like and the conversation turned to PCOS, and she's like, oh yeah, you have PCOS, right? I'm like, I don't know what that is. It's like, oh, it's like when there's a problem with like your ovaries. I'm like, well, I definitely don't have that. And she's like, wait, are you trans? I'm like, yeah. She had no idea I was trans.
For a while, I thought about telling people I had PCOS, like before I was like confident enough in my own transition to like not feel like I need to pass. But yeah, no, I have also been told, oh, you have PCOS, right? And I'm like, no, I don't.
Like,
I'm just trans.
No ovaries here.
No ovaries to be found. 404 ovaries not found.
Yes. But yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, that's kind of like not so much that part, but the it's kind of like a universal trans experience where like we kind of hyper focus on the things that we think are going to get us clocked. Whereas the reality is that most people are completely oblivious to these things and will never notice until you point them out. So I have quite a few stories about things that I thought were going to get me clocked, or things that I thought people were going to notice when I first started transitioning, and people just don't notice these things. So
they really don't. It's we are so caught up in our own brains about like our own experiences and what we think about, and everyone is like that. And I think we just sometimes forget that like everyone is caught up in their own experiences and caught up in their own brains. And so I don't think about what the person across the street is wearing or has or whatever, because I'm just like thinking about my own stuff, like, oh, am I gonna cross the street on time today?
Yeah, it's like you have to try really hard to get people's attention.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's my advice for any of you baby transes like listening right now. And if you are having some anxiety, if you're worried about trying some different presentation, honey, just do it. Like no one's gonna notice or care.
One of my favorite things that I've heard is I am a statement. And I think that is like the embodiment of me and my gender. Is like I walk into a room and I am a statement. I am the like attention. But that took a lot of work to get up to. I'm 4 years in my transition. I feel confident in who I am and where I'm at. But that isn't everyone else's experience. And so maybe someday you'll get to I am an experience. I am a like presence. I am the person who walks in the room and takes up all of the air. But sometimes you're just like, I want to hide in my little like cloak and just be in the background. Don't notice me.
Oh my God, yes.
Both of those are totally acceptable and
oh my God, I
experiences.
understand that energy so well, because like sometimes I do just want to like disappear into the background, but there are other times where like I literally am like sucking all the air from the room. So.
Yeah. I think that as trans people, we have very good experiences in both, like the public speaking and the do not perceive me.
Yes, and that's something that like even way before I realized I was trans, like I would just that very much part of my experience. So I am like right there with you. So we're going to wrap up with our final question. What would you like to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary, trans, and or gender diverse issues?
I am a huge advocate for all gender experiences. I think that it's really important that we talk about these things. I currently sit as chair of a trans organization that's doing a lot of advocacy and support work. I kind of mentioned that I am based out of Minnesota, which
Mm,
just signed the trans refuge bill. So, we
mm,
are trying to take in trans folks into Minnesota. Of course, there are systematic things that are kind of problematic with that.
yeah.
But I try to be a safe place for everyone, and especially those who are trans, gender diverse, non-binary, whatever the experience you have may be. And also, I may be young, I'm 21, but you can be an elder at any age, and you can have
True.
experiences that help other people at any age. The greatest messages that I've received are from 65, 70-year-olds who are like, I listened to your podcast and I just found out that I was trans, and
Oh my
I
God,
like,
that's incredible.
and so it's really important that we talk about these things and share that you can be a baby trans at any age and you can be an
Mhm,
elder at any age. It's just the way that you carry yourself and the way that you talk about it and the way that
mhm.
you want to help people.
Yeah. No, and you bring up an excellent point. I mean, there are definitely people that I look up to as like my elders that are younger than me.
Mhm.
Because they started their journey. Because I mean, like I started my trans journey in my late 30s.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I'm still kind of a baby trans. Um, and you know, a lot of like my quote unquote trans role models are people who are significantly younger than me.
Mhm.
So, like you said, you can be an elder at any age, you can be, a baby trans at any age. And I think for folks who do transition later in life, um there are things that unrelated to transness that's we can kind of impart some of our like old person wisdom onto the younger generation, and they can
Yeah.
impart their gender wisdom onto the older generation, so we can kind of help each other out. So I know I've definitely been helped out a lot by folks who are quite a bit younger than me. So,
And I love talking with like actual elders, I guess, people
mhm,
who are a lot older than me, because there are experiences. I had a really good experience talking with a couple of elders who told me that they didn't have role models, queer role models when they were growing up
mm,
or experiencing their identities. And so it's okay to have role models who are younger than you. And it's also okay to recognize if you don't have any role models yet who like identify with your gender or um who experience the similar things as you, because everyone's journey is different. And I just hope that we can all get to a place where we're happy with who we are as people.
mhm. I love that. All right. Well, this has been a wonderful talk. I hope everyone had as much fun with this as I did. So Anna is a disabled, lesbian, and queer trans woman. Faye is the trans co-host of the Transgender Podcast and an intersectional activist. And you can find their podcast over at transgenderpod.com. And you can also find all their socials in the chat. And if you're listening to this in the future, it'll be in the notes in the down below. So here is this week's Clatter query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
What are some ways you can support the disabled trans people out there? And I think we talked about some, but I also think it's important that we talk about other ideas.
Awesome. All right, so next week there is no Genderful. So Genderful is only the first 3 Mondays of every month. So we'll be taking the next week off. And on July 31st, our guest will be Rihanna Prince Zaddy, they, them pronouns. And we're discussing druidry, drag, and neurodivergence. And later this week, we actually have our stream anniversary for the Gender Meowster channel. So be sure to tune in for that. And I think we're also going to be doing a special event for Meowster's birthday coming up soon. So be sure to tune in for that. And you can also check out my channel. I haven't been streaming lately, but I'll be coming back soon. So you can check me out at Nassattack, both here on Twitch and on Twitter. And also on YouTube, where I post, fun videos of me losing all self-control and being completely just losing my mind playing Celeste. And other fun videos. So I actually just posted a video today of the curse stream during our most recent mutual aid event. So go check that out as well. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks for tuning in, and take care, everyone.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays at twitch.tv/gendermeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited version of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you would like the host to answer, or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, The Clatter wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You could take a few moments to also rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Artist credit for Genderful. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by Free Range Megs, aka Soma. The Gender Meowster logo was designed by That's Barnaby and edited with consent by Transgriffin. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and Alexis Vandam. Genderful's social media is managed by Queer to Help. Genderful is hosted by Atlas O Phoenix and Gender Meowster. Genderful is the intellectual property of Gender Meowster. All rights reserved.
Trans rights are human rights. That's right.